Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Mr. Merrigan's Moments in History. So glad that you could join us. We're going to continue talking about the Jefferson era, and as you can tell from the image on our screen here, we're going to be talking about the Louisiana Purchase, and yes, we're going to get into Lewis and Clark here a little bit as well. This is going to be pivotal for the United States. We're going to see it nearly double in size after this purchase of land from the French. But we'll get a little bit more into the Louisiana Purchase throughout today. But for my students, welcome. Use this video as a reference. Please use this to help you fill out your guided notes. For those of you who are just listening, maybe to gain a little bit of historical knowledge or because you're interested in the topic, thank you for joining us. Glad to have you along. And students, keep in mind, the territory that you and I live in, this was a part of the Louisiana Purchase. So in many ways, our connection to the United States begins with this purchase. All right, that learning target for today is I can describe how the Louisiana Purchase affected the nation's economy and its politics. We're going to start to answer that question today, and we'll keep building on that in our next section as well. All right, American pioneers at this moment in U.S. history, so the early 1800s, we're seeing American pioneers load up what we call a Conestoga wagon. Now, if you're a fan of the game The Oregon Trail, or even if you just kind of think about that movement in Settlement West, the Conestoga wagon, or that large, broad-wheeled, canvas-covered wagon used by Western settlers, that's what probably comes to your mind. This is a very iconic image in U.S. history. Again, kind of helps us to think about that movement west. And so it's kind of one of those images that, again, is in our brains as far as how we think about the history of our nation. And that certainly is going to move to west towards the Mississippi River. But that was kind of where many settlers were stopping because that was the boundary of the United States at the time. Everything west of that was a part of what was called the Louisiana Territory, which in the time period that we're talking about was a part of France. And so people loaded up these wagons and they were gearing up because the West offered an opportunity. One of the things that we see Jefferson really wants to create is an agrarian society, one that's based on agriculture. And so the opportunity to move west presented an opportunity to gain land and to kind of pull yourself up by your bootstraps, so to speak, in creating your own opportunities. But we know, and we will know and see more examples in the future, that that's going to certainly create conflicts with the people who are already living there, Native Americans or American Indians. So the Louisiana Territory, on the map that you guys are looking at, that is the land west of the Mississippi River. And originally, this belongs to Spain. And one of the reasons why this area was very coveted as your empires, especially your European countries, were building empires in North America, is because the Mississippi River created a really important port city, that being New Orleans, or as natives would say, Nolans, and I know I mispronounced that, but it represented a really genuine, important port city for trade. And certainly because you could trade up throughout the Missouri River and the Mississippi River, and the French were very adept at this, especially with their fur trade, and sailing it all the way down the Mississippi into New Orleans, and of course making its way into European markets later, but certainly original colonies as well. So originally it belongs to Spain, but in 1802 Spain is going to secretly transfer that Louisiana territory to the French. And again, that's going to provide a really important opportunity for France, who's becoming more of a power, especially after helping the United States gain its independence in Europe. And France's leader, which is Napoleon Bonaparte, had plans to create empires in Europe and the Americas, ranging from Haiti into the Louisiana Territory. And for world history fans, Napoleon Bonaparte is a very interesting figure. At the tail end of the First French Revolution, which introduced ideas of a republic, again, partially sparked by the U.S.'s revolution, he's going to take power, and essentially he's going to become a military dictator. Then he's going to be exiled to an island in which He's going to then return, regain power again, and fight against many nations in Europe, including Great Britain. And it's there at Waterloo where he's going to be defeated again. He's going to be exiled one more time, but this time he's not going to get off the island. But he again, at this time, was empire building. But there's going to be a really important event, a revolt of enslaved Africans and other laborers led by a man by the name of Toussaint Louverture, and I apologize again if I mispronounced that, um, in the key port city of Santo Domingo. And that's going to end Napoleon's dream of a Western Empire. In fact, he's going to kind of say, you know, forget this idea of colony building. I'm going to continue to fight in Europe. But we know wars are not cheap, and so Napoleon needs money. And that's where the United States is going to enter. Now, Jefferson at this point understands the importance of New Orleans. He really believes this is an important city. It's an important port. The mouth at the mouth of the Mississippi River, the end of the Mississippi River. And he sends some diplomats to France in order to buy the city of New Orleans from the French. But Napoleon, again, needing money to fight that war, particularly against Britain, but he's also going to be fighting a new alliance of European powers who are trying to put him down. Napoleon actually agrees to sell the whole territory to the United States, and he's going to sell it for the low, low price of $15 million. Now, why on earth do I say that that's a low price? Because for the money, that's 3 cents an acre. Probably one of the best land deals, if not in U.S. history and if not in world history, for sure in U.S. history. A phenomenal deal for the U.S. And Jefferson is a little hesitant because, one, he's very surprised that Napoleon would do this to them. The vast amount of land and the resources that Napoleon could pull from here. But he's a little concerned about whether the government has the right to even do this. Does he have the authority under the Constitution? Because remember, Jefferson, laissez-faire, hands off. He believes that the government should be small, and he believes in limiting the power of the U.S. government. But he is going to move forward with this. And so we have to ask the big question is, why was the Louisiana Purchase an important event in American history? Well, not only is it going to double the size of the United States, but it's going to set up some really important events in the 19th century or the 1800s. And that part of that is going to be conflict, Native Americans, the British, and another part is going to be economic opportunity, particularly for white settlers moving west who are trying to build, again, that dream of Jefferson's of the agrarian or farm-based society. So in 1804, Congress is going to sponsor an expedition because now that we've bought this land, we need to explore it and we need to see what we bought. And so this new Western territory is going to be explored by an expedition, and they're going to search for what we call the Northwest Passage. Yes, the fabled Northwest Passage, that waterway that would connect the United States and be able to get into the markets of Asia and again make their way to the Pacific Ocean. Now, Lieutenant Zebulon Pike, a very important African American lieutenant, said in 1806 that the great objects in view were to acquire such geographic knowledge of the southwestern boundary of Louisiana as to enable our government to enter into a definite arrangement of a line of demarcation, a boundary between that and the territory of New Mexico. Now, at the time, you can see on this map that this is Spanish territory. But as we move further into U.S. history, you're going to see that this is going to become Mexico. And again, we're setting up for the for the Mexican-American War, which will be coming up later in this century. And so, with this idea that we need to explore this new territory, that's where Meriwether Lewis and William Clark come in. They are going to lead that expedition, and they are going to be guided by a young Shoshone woman named Sacagawea. Her knowledge and her abilities as an interpreter are going to be invaluable to the Corps of Discovery. So one of the big questions we need to ask ourselves is, why did President Jefferson choose Lewis and Clark for this particular expedition? Well, we know that both men were well-known amateur scientists, and part of what Jefferson wanted to know is, what resources do we have here? What animals are here? What plants are here? What opportunity do we have to better understand this land? You also know that both men conducted business with Native Americans, and one of the things that students in my class we're going to do is we're going to look at Jefferson's letter to Lewis and Clark, and you're going to see how he wanted them to conduct themselves with Native Americans, because in order for this to be successful, he knew that they needed to be able to negotiate. So that experience was very valuable. Now, again, we mentioned Zebulon Pike also is going to lead expeditions. He's a very important figure, and he's one that we probably don't know as much about, but his contributions to the Corps of Discovery and our knowledge, particularly of the upper Mississippi Valley into what we now know as present-day Colorado, were very, very valuable and important for understanding this new Louisiana territory. And he's going to prove to be a very important um, part of this expedition. Another lesser known African American on this journey too is a slave by the name of York. And there's going to be a point where York is going to save a lot of the diaries of particularly Lewis and Clark, and that information is going to be invaluable to understanding again that idea and that importance of what they discovered on the trip. So certainly we don't want to leave out the contribution of those two very important men. All right, Meriwether Lewis is quoted as saying, "The country is, as yesterday, beautiful in the extreme." And he's, in this particular quote, the country that he's referring to is the Louisiana Territory. It's the Louisiana Purchase. And the idea that it is beautiful, but it is beautiful in a very extreme way. And one that, as they discover it, I think they're going to find that it holds more and more beauty. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to wrap up where we're going to cover things for this section. So for my students, this is where you're going to end for kind of our section 2 notes. So as you're following along with the guided reading, again, the great thing about having this video is that you can pause it, you can slow it down, you can go at your own pace. And for students, if you happen to get this information in class, come back, check out the video. It's a great way to maybe recap and review some of the material today for a test coming up. For those of you who just were interested in the topic, or you like history and you listen to us today, I really appreciate you coming and listening with us. I hope that in some ways we can continue to help you build on that historical knowledge of the United States. As always, again, thank you for listening. To my students, thank you for listening, and we'll see you on the next edition of Mr. Merrigan's Moments in History.